Man, what a year it's been.
It's the year 2020.
Ugh, I hate this year.
What's wrong with this year?
This year was supposed to be great.
Truth be told, despite the pandemic-filled elephant in the room, 2020 was a decent enough year for film. There were many films I wouldn't consider to be great overall, but I didn't see a film that I couldn't stand watching. Except these two Disney shitbags. However, during November and December, I caught up with some notable films that I now feel confident to tell you what my top 10 favorite films of the year are. I didn't get to see all the films I wanted, like Da 5 Bloods, Borat 2, or Run, but I was able to see 42 movies! Kill me. I do want to give some mentions to films that I didn't quite make it onto the list, but are special enough to be recommended. Feels Good Man was a very shocking and intense documentary all about the weird memeing frog known as Pepe. Dick Johnson is Dead was just such a heartwarming documentary about this lovable man and his bond with his daughter. Blackpink Light Up the Sky was a very endearing and inspiring documentary about these lovable people. Bad Education gave us one of Wolverine's best performances to date and was just such a riveting drama piece. The Sound of Metal was an emotionally gripping film with Riz Ahmed's best performance to date. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom was Chadwick Boseman's last film, but he gave possibly the best performance of his career. Onward was a wonderful anime film, though not one of Pixar's best, I'll admit, and you'll see later what one other film could possibly be one of my favorite Pixar movies. I don't know, we gotta see. Spree was one of the most underrated thrillers of the year with a wild performance from my boy Steve Harrington. The Invisible Man was an innovative and fun, though definitely flawed film in a few areas like the ending. Over the Moon was one of the biggest surprises of the year for me and had one of the Schuyler sisters as the main antagonist, so you know it's great. A special mention goes out to the Small Axe collection created by Steve McQueen of 12 Years a Slave fame. I've seen only 3 of the 5 films that were on there, but all 3 were very unique and exciting films with some amazing performances. Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Kimmy vs. the Revenant was a very funny, enjoyable, and entertaining film based on a show I've never even seen. My bad. Gone with Horses is a very intense Irish gangster film with excellent music. The Platform was a very intriguing and unique horror flick from Netflix with an awful dubbing to it, so yikes. And Justice League Dark Apocalypse War is a film with many of your favorite DC heroes dying in so many demonetizable ways. So it was fun. Alright, now onto this list because it's gonna be a doozy one this time, kids.
Don't fuck with me! I have the power of God!
Looking back on it now, Birds of Prey did have a promising cast and most of them did a good job. Too bad it sucked ass. If only there was a film that came out this year with a large cast that has a story that both told the past and the present. Oh yeah, there was Antonio Campos' latest film, The Devil All the Time. I've rewritten this intro so many times, I just wanted to jab at Birds of Prey for some reason. That's the most I ever had to say about that movie. I understand that this is not a film for everyone. There are moments in this movie that make me feel uncomfortable even. There are moments that even I looked away. For all you men out there are watching this video that have seen this movie, you know what scene I'm talking about. Ugh. But even with that, I've been thinking about this movie's themes and story for quite some time. How each story intertwines with each other, and how it makes it so much more rewatchable because of it. Cinematography is excellent and really makes you feel like a fly on the wall, witnessing these horrible people doing equally horrible acts. With the exception of Tom Holland and one of the other characters, everyone in this movie is an awful human being. Honestly, they're some of the worst of the worst. But they're so intriguingly horrible that it's just so entertaining to watch. The score is great as well, but it's the performances that makes this film for me. This is probably the best performance I've seen Spidey Boy himself give. And Pennywise himself is, well, as terrifying a human being as he is a killer clown. Who would have thought that Dudley Dursley would make such a compelling character? But he does. My favorites in the film may be Twilight Sparkles himself and Riley Keough. Yeah, I couldn't come up with a clever name for her, sorry. They play 2 distinctly different characters, but it's the way they manipulate other characters and how they control the scenes that make them so unforgettable. But yeah, this film is still fucked up in a lot of scenes. and not all of them make me feel happy to rewatch, but the way the story plays out and how each character plays off one another makes this film so impactful for me. You thought Infinity War was the best crossover ever? Well, that's still true, but this is a close second.
If you could give Charles Foster Kane advice, what would you say to him?
Get yourself a different woman.
This is the first year I've ever watched Citizen Kane, and wow, shockers, it was great. Everyone has sung its praises by now, and it's clear to see why. While I can't go out of my way to say it's a full-on masterpiece, I can say it was a very insightful and compelling film from beginning to end. But I'll be the first to admit that I was a little worried about Mank, and I'll be the first to admit that it isn't even one of my favorite David Fincher's movies. But with that said, man, this movie is a sight to behold. The techniques used to create the 1940s aesthetics is astounding. The way the audio has this echo to each character, the white glow around each character, the score and what instruments they use, and seeing those good old cigarette burns on the corner of the screen makes this feel like an archive movie from the 1940s brought back to life in the present day. The performances are also fantastic, with Gary Oldman playing Mank in such a fantastic and entertaining way. Amanda Seyfried giving one of her best performances to date, in my opinion, as the way she talks and moves feels like she was straight out of the 40s. The only problems I have with this movie is that it's not as investing as it truly wants to be. The first act of the film is probably the most enjoyable when seeing how the film industry worked back in the day, but the second act seemed to drag it quite a bit. There's a very political aspect to it that I didn't really get on board with, but the third act did save it for me, which includes probably my favorite scene in the film, with Mank drunkenly telling other producers his grand plan of a film. But getting to that was kind of a chore. Still, it was a very technically sound movie and had performances that kept me on board, and I'm excited to see what David Fincher does next. It was a very interesting and innovative film that had just a little bit of a pacing error, maybe just like cut off 15 minutes and you'll be good. Also, let me just say that Bill fucking Nye is in this movie as Upton Sinclair. 10 out of 10 for the science guy, no other cameo will beat this.
Dress up as a little girl. Rape Battle Bear!
Well, that was intense. I only seen one of Cartoon Saloon's other anime movies, that being Song of the Sea, which I really enjoyed. I've yet to see Secret Kells and The Breadwinner, so don't come at me saying I don't know what I'm talking about when I say that The Wolfwalkers is one of the best anime movies I've seen in recent years. I've been drawn to Celtic mythology, but I've never heard about this lore and what a tale they had to tell. The animation is so crisp and beautiful, with every movement from each character complementing the other. I loved all the characters, and I didn't want to see anything bad happen to any of them. They had such endearing quirks and personalities that I just fell in love with all of them, except this dweeb, who's voiced by a creature from Harry Potter. Speaking of voice acting, the music was fantastic, and I love the song they used during certain moments in the movie. But it's the way the story plays out and how each character affects each other that made me fall head over heels, or really head over paws, with this film. The ending had me on the edge of my seat, and I was very much eager to see what happened next. But my only issues are that the scenes in the forest were just so much fun, and the animation was just so amazing, that when we returned to the town, it wasn't all that investive. It's not that it's bad, it's just that I felt like the feeling of adventure and wonderment was just gone whenever we entered back into the town. Also, maybe a few scenes could have been trimmed down just a bit to help with the pacing. Other than that, this is just a beautiful tale that I'd be happy to see again. Also, Sean Bean's in this movie, and whether or not he dies, you gotta find out for yourself.
Chilling with my boys and we cruising down the street.
Yeah. It's getting really hot, yeah, these bars are super heat.
Yeah,
Drum in this car, yeah, we finna go to Mars.
Yeah, I'm really fucking sad I might go and crash the car.
Okay, so we already got a K-pop documentary, a darkly comical documentary, and a very, very fucking weird documentary. Is that all?
Nope.
As much as I love those previous films, Boise has hit me on a personal level like no other documentary I've seen this year. As someone who's grown up in a very politically active household, I can understand these kids' dreams of becoming politicians. I mean, I will never become a politician, and I hope to never have those conversations on the dinner table ever again, but the reason why I relate to and understand these kids is because they have goals and dreams and they'll go through anything just to see those dreams fulfilled. Sure, some kids aren't as focused on as others, and a kid is properly introduced in the third act, which is kind of weird. But besides that, this is a perfectly paced, fantastically directed, beautiful film with some of my favorite scenes in any film this year. I'm sure you'll have a great time.
Time travel!
Of all the films I've seen this year, Tenet is the one that I have the most conflicting feelings about. I mean, it's number 6 on the list, and I love it just based on a technical level, but on my first viewing, I was very confused with what was going on, and why I should really care about these characters and what they're doing. But I soon came back to rewatch it, and I was just blown away again by the visuals and the action, but this time around I was given more clarity to what the premise means and what it does. And with that, I soon found this film to be an absolute work of genius on Nolan's part. I won't spoil what is actually going on and what's happening, as many of you still haven't seen this movie, but it's definitely a film that you need to pay close attention to. What I will say is that the action is pitch perfect for what this kind of film is, the visuals are super seamless, the acting is great, especially from John David Washington and Twilight Sparkles in his second appearance on this list. God, it's like he's a secretly fantastic actor and no one will give him the light of day because he was in this piece of shit franchise. And the ending was ambitious yet poetic in many ways. Sure, I wasn't sure what was going on my first viewing, but this film proves with his second viewing and a deep examination of both the ending and the characters' motivations, you'll have the best experience ever. But seriously, support this film just for Bobby Pattinson, as he is a great actor and no one will give him a light of day and no one will admit because y'all are a piece of shit.
Oh, magic conch shell, what do we need to do to get out of the kelp forest? Execute Order 66.
The shell has spoken!
Aaron Sorkin is one of my favorite writers, and his first foray into directing was actually really good. But I would be the first to admit that I didn't know how to feel about the trial of Chicago 7. I don't know why. It didn't pique my interest as much as it should have. Maybe it's because of the subject matter, or maybe it's just because it looked like any other biopic out there right now. But with that being said, I freaking love this movie. I was thoroughly impressed by how well this film turned out. As with anything involving Sorkin, the writing was top notch and had many layers to dig into. The storytelling was actually handled really well, mostly due to the editing and how they cut between the past and the present. However, what makes this film work as well as it does is the acting. Eddie Redmayne was great, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt played such a punchful lawyer. It was great. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II was very sympathetic in this film, and he had such a layer of sadness to his character that, if given to any other actor, it wouldn't have worked as well. Jeremy Strong was just so likable and funny in this film. It has moments to shine as well. However, the two standouts for me, and the ones I'm most confident will receive nominations, at least they better, are the BFG himself and Borat. I mean, Mark Rylance and Sacha Baron Cohen. Cohen alone makes this movie work so well with his charm, charisma, wittiness, and sympathy. But let me tell you that I believe this is probably the best performance he's given to date. I love me some Borat, but let's be real here. The Academy doesn't deserve him. Rylance also gives his character some needed depth and helps make us root for people like him in this film. If I did have some nitpicks, I would say that the cameo used in the movie, though awesome to see, didn't really do as much towards the story as maybe it should have, and maybe the ending felt a little dramatized, but besides those, this is still another notch in Sorkin's belt, and one of my favorite crime dramas I've seen in recent years.
Fuck you, I'm drunk! Fuck you, I'm drunk, and I'm going to be drunk till the next time I'm drunk!
Who would have thought that a film about 4 drunk old men would be one of the most emotionally poignant films of the year? Another Round was just such a surprise to me. I heard buzz about it from Tiff and Cannes, but I never thought I would be this interested in it. The film is about these 4 friends trying to challenge their blood alcohol level by trying to keep a constant low level of intoxication. Well, that's just the simple premise of the film. What's within it is just one of the most honest and real looks at alcoholism and how it could truly start to ruin people's lives. Mads Mikkelsen possibly gives the best performance of the year in my opinion. He's an actor who can tell a story just from the looks of his eyes, and there are moments where it's just silent contemplation, and he makes the scenes work so well. The film does feel slow, and some people will probably get bored easily with the film, but for me, I was just very much on board. I would say that the film did start to drag nearing towards the second act, and I wasn't too sure where the film was going for a good while, but I paid attention and it paid off beautifully. To me, the last act was just perfect. There's a thing that happens to one of the characters that shows how far these men have come from this idea, and it actually made me tear up a little. But in my opinion, the standout of this movie is the ending. The ending and the song that plays during the ending is easily one of the most cathartic and satisfying moments of the year for me. It's my favorite ending of the year. There's just so much about the ending that I can't get into, but if you watch it and you understand the context of the film, it will impact you as much as me. I never thought that this kind of film would affect me to this level, but alas, it did. But also, be careful how you drink. Just drink responsibly, kids.
Over and 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 over.
I know you might think I'm joking, but hear me out. Palm Springs was easily the biggest surprise of the year for me, and one of the best comedies I've seen in recent years. Keep in mind, I never watched a trailer or seen any promotional material for this film. I just heard it was a very solid comedy. I like Andy Samberg, fine enough, but who would have thought that this was going to be one of the most entertaining and subversive comedies I've ever seen in my life? Sure, people compare it to Groundhog's Day and Edge of Tomorrow, which is fair. This concept has been done plenty of times before, of course, but not in this way that I've seen this film do. You never really saw anyone just grow content with where they are, yet they ruin many of other people's lives because of what they did. There's a layer of tragedy to these characters' lives due to what Andy Samberg's character does, and how he pretty much ruins any future they have. But that's also kind of the beauty of the situation. You try and make do with what time you have, even if it's the same over and over. There's a scene with J.K. Simmons which explains what happened to him after the incident, and yeah, it's funny, but you know that because of Andy Samberg's selfishness, he'll never really able to see his life again. It's just a very deep and complex film that's also really funny. The performances from everyone was great, the setups to later jokes was hysterical, and the ending was very satisfying. Though I will admit getting to the end was a little confusing, but hey, it was a very great ending, so I'm not complaining. Also, pay attention to the beer Samberg keeps drinking throughout the film as a very clever detail that I found out after watching this movie. What else can I say? I was just so surprised by this clever, witty, emotional, and powerful film that was created through the minds of the Dick in a Box people. So yeah, it was great. Still, there are 2 more films to go.
And the sun flicks my eyes. It was all a pack of lies.
I've enjoyed many films this year, but no other film, besides one, made me think as much about its themes, direction, and writing as much as I'm thinking of ending things. I'm familiar with some of Charlie Kaufman's previous writing credits, but I was not too familiar about his directing credits. I hear great things about each of them respectively, but none of them got the notoriety that other films get, so I never really got to them. But I heard weird things about this film, and I wanted to check it out for myself, and wow, it was so worth the watch. On the surface level, it just seems very confused. It was a weird mess of events, some people said, that didn't really make sense. Like, how are these characters old in this scene but look nice and pretty in the next scene? Why is the film inexplicably cut to an old man who seemingly has nothing to do with the overall story or the established characters? What the fuck is that ending? And why is Oklahoma so apparent in this movie? Why is this your choice of musical? I'm sorry, not a fan. But upon further reflection, and where the story eventually leads to, it's actually some flawless methods of storytelling while telling another story. If you watch the film, you know what I mean. The performances from the 2 Jessies were fantastic. Toni Collette and David Thewlis play their respective roles so well, and the dialogue is super sharp and just adds layers upon layers upon layers of thematic richness. There's a dancing scene in this movie that is maybe one of my favorite moments of silent storytelling I ever seen in a film, and it's just such a beautiful sequence on its own, even without the context of the story. All I can say is that check this film out. It's an actual masterpiece. Pat yourself on the back, Kaufman. You're probably not going to be noticed by Academy because Sonic will overtake it. Let's be real here, people. But there is still one more film that I think is a true cinematic masterpiece. Palm Springs and I'm Thinking of Ending Things were both really big contenders for my favorite film of the year. But no other film this year made me reflect on what I'm doing with my life and what I want to do going forward better than Soul. It's pretty much a given now with Pixar's track history that this film would somehow affect me, such as movies like Inside Out, Coco, and Toy Story 1, 2, 3, and even 4. But Soul tackles something so much deeper than any Pixar film I've seen. It made me think about life, what it has in store, what you could gain from it, how much each day makes you grow as a person, and how you can leave a lasting impact even when you're gone. Similar to Inside Out, there is so much creativity when it comes to the personification of ideas in the most beautiful of ways. They show ideas like how we're sometimes desperate for purpose, how we take in the moments you'll keep forever, and how much more we can give to this world no matter how you may feel in the moment. At first, I was really worried when Tina Fey's soul child entered into the movie, and yeah, her first few scenes are a little annoying. But once you understand what she's going through and how she really wants to understand life, you start to grow on her. There's a scene in the film where everything is just quiet and you just see a character just looking around and taking in the scenery with a swelling score backing up, and for some reason, it felt like I was in that moment. I felt like I was looking at everything and thought, I'll keep going. I never experienced that sense of the film in quite some time, but this film had it for me. And par for the course of Pixar, there will be scenes that definitely make you cry. The film is still new, and by the time I'm writing this isn't even a day old yet. But once you watch the film, you'll see which moment I'm referring to. I don't think I stopped crying for a good 5 to 10 minutes after watching it. And that's just a testament to a fantastic script and story with some amazing music as well. Yeah, there are some jokes that are definitely made for kids, but they didn't make me cringe like any jokes made in that Pixar movie. Sorry, I just, whenever I talk about Pixar, I have an anxiety attack for a bit when I talk about that kind of film, which I will not mention again, I wish never existed. Anyways, the score is also fantastic, as it should be, since the main character's main goal is jazz music. As stated before, there are scenes where nothing is really happening, but the score still makes the scene even more impactful. It may be my favorite score in any Pixar movie. The voice acting was also really good, with Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey giving it their all with their roles. Honestly, I could barely say a bad thing about this movie. It's just such a wonderful, emotional, reflective, and powerful film that just hit me so hard on every level. And with that, it makes Soul my favorite film of 2020. Though, if I'm being honest, none of these films, even my number one, topped any of my previous favorite films of previous years. None of them reached the level of excellence as Whiplash, Winter Soldier, Deathly Hallows Part 2, Your Name, Sing Street, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Parasite, Blade Runner 2049, Spider-Verse, Fury Road, Prisoners, or Inception. And if I had my way, Portrait would be on here and it would be my immediate number one. If only there was a film that came out this year that could compete with those films, that could stand on its own as a true masterpiece and has made a name for itself and has single-handedly saved 2020 movies for me. I think you know where I'm going with this. I said this in my reaction to the trailer, and I'll say it again. I'd never really listened to or appreciated Hamilton before. I mean, if my sisters played it in the car, I could tolerate it fine. But when Disney announced that this is coming to a streaming site, I was pretty pumped. Yet, I still had my suspicions. I thought it would never amount to anything and it would just be another musical. Another boring musical. So I watched it the day it came out, and holy shit, I was so wrong about this musical. Everything about this musical is top tier greatness. The set design and how they utilized it was super creative and inspired. The performances from everyone, especially from Daveed Diggs and Leslie Odom Jr., are some of the best in any musical ever, but it's the songs that make this musical so endlessly engaging and enjoyable for me. While the story is pretty basic, just telling the story of Alexander Hamilton, the songs make it up with some of the most extremely catchy numbers and lyrics that I've seen in a musical that are so genius and inspiring. If I had to pick my favorites, it would definitely be Yorktown, Wait For It, and Guns and Ships. And yes, I learned how to do the rap, so I'm officially initiated into the fan base based on the comments regarding the song. All these songs and more show us the passion that went into this musical and why it's had a lasting impact on us musical lovers. The cinematography and editing were also really good and helped make the scenes more grand, and the ending made me sob so hard, even if they spoiled it in the opening number. I decided not to officially put it onto the list as it would seem unfair to other notable films that came out this year, but I just wanted to mention it at some point just to let y'all know how good this truly is. What else can I say? It's just a flawlessly executed musical that will stand the test of time and will be known as a staple in musical history. I watched it so many times and I plan to watch it more in the future. Have a nice night, y'all. I'm probably gonna make another parody video now. Good night.